Hello and welcome to video number 4 of the Supported Living DSP Quantum Training 10-part video series. This one will probably be the most in-depth, if not most technical, so I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance. But this is commandment number 4, and we're going to talk about overlaps in the admin code use. So the official fourth commandment says that only one staff can use a ResHab code, and actually it doesn't have to be ResHab, it's any billable code. So one staff can use a billable code for any single client at any given time. Any other staff will have to use the admin code and note what staff they are overlapping with. A subnote says if there are multiple staff, confirm who will code their time as ResHab and which staff will code their time as admin. This will not change your payroll, so I want to go ahead and get that out on the open. 2 or more staff are never allowed to claim the same client at the exact same time. This is also known as an overlap. So this is a pretty wordy commandment, so we're going to have to break it down and translate it to English. So the first thing is, what exactly is an overlap? So an overlap is anytime a client is receiving 2 separate services, or actually they can be the same, but they're coming from 2 separate staff at the exact same time. So here's a really simple example. Let's say your shift ends at 8 a.m. and the client you're with, in this case client A, gets on the van to go to ADN access at 8 a.m., which is nice. So your shift ends at 8 a.m., the client leaves at 8 a.m., but you stay until 8:15 to finish some work. Whatever, it could be quantum or you could be cleaning up, doesn't matter. The van driver or whoever maybe came to relieve you at 8 a.m. shows that they had the clients from 8 a.m. onward. So you leave your shift at 8:15, showing that you have ResHab on those clients. Technically, that is an overlap. So kind of breaking it down, so let's say my shift ends at 8 a.m. and I show that I had this client A until 8:15, but you came in to relieve me at 8 a.m. and you showed that you had that client from 8 a.m. onward. Well, I can't say that I've had the client until 8:15 and you say that you had the client at 8 a.m. That's a 15-minute overlap. Probably a better example would be the one that's highlighted here. So let's say my shift ends at 8 a.m. and the client leaves to go on a van to a day program, in this case ADN access. That van driver says, hey, from 8 a.m. to 8:30, I was providing transportation services, but we're showing that we had them till 8:15. That's impossible. A client can't be receiving residential services at the exact same time they were on a van. As much as technology has greatly improved in the past millennium, in 2018, a client cannot be in 2 places at once. They can't be receiving residential services in a Hawthorne Glen home while being in a van being transported. Sorry, someone has to change their time. And the vast majority, 90+% of overlaps occur at shift changes. So the thing that I always urge new hires to do is anytime your shift starts and ends and whoever's relieving you or you're relieving them, just simply ask, hey, when are you showing that you have the clients to? And you just pick it up after that. Because otherwise, in situations where you stay an extra 15 or you show up early, 15 minutes early, and everybody just uses ResHab and the clients were there, there's going to be overlaps, and it just slows everything down. It slows payroll down, it slows billing down. And it's a very easy fix, especially when the vast majority of it's simple 15-minute overlaps. So let's kind of see this in practice. So going back to the map I had earlier, my shift was from, in this case, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Oh, excuse me. It's actually till 8:15. Now remember, again, each of these blocks represents a 15-minute increment. If your time stops directly below it, it's actually 15 minutes in. So really, you have to look at the cell that's to the top right of it. So really, this is up until 8:15. So let's say on, again, November 2nd, Sam, in this instance, gets on a van at 8 o'clock to go over to a day program. Another person does not go to a day program, but my shift ends at 8 and I'm being relieved by Billy. So Billy comes to relieve me. So I stay after 15 minutes and I complete my map, just like this, my grid, excuse me, map, grid, whatever. But Billy says, hey, I showed up at 8 o'clock. I'm going to show that I had another person at 8 a.m. So I can't, so me and Billy cannot show the same person, in this case, another, at the same time. I can't show that I was providing residential services at between 8 o'clock and 8:15. Same situation with Billy. He can't show that he had them from 8 o'clock to 8:15. So one of us is going to have to change. In this case, let's say it's me. To do that, I'm just going to right click and just clear it. It just gets rid of it. Now, in this case, in this situation, I think I said that Sam got on a bus at 8 o'clock. So let's say, excuse me, later on that day, I get a call from a program manager, and they said, hey, listen, Trey, I show that you're overlapping with the van driver at 8 o'clock. They're showing that Sam was on the bus at 8 o'clock, and you're showing that he was in the house until 8, from 8 to 8:15. Well, I need to, then me as Trey, I'm in the wrong, because if they're not in the house, I can't show ResHab. So I'm going to clear this. Now, we have a slight problem. Takeaway number 2 or 3 said, hey, I can't have a non-staff coach showing up with nothing underneath it. But wait a minute, I stayed until 8:15. I'd like to get paid, so we got to change this. I can't get paid this 15-minute block of time when I had no clients, but I did stay, so I do want to get paid. Well, this is the perfect example of when to use admin time. So I'm going to clear this out. And as you can see, admin time is a staff code, which means it can go in up on the top grid and with nothing underneath it. So as of right now, we're good. Now, I do believe it is I don't know if it's the next commandment, I can't remember off the top of my head, but one of the things with admin codes is please write down the note as to why exactly and what you're using this admin time for. Most likely, you can say something overlapping with, I think I said Billy and van driver. I'm just going to save that note. So basically, coming down the pipeline, if I, in the event that myself or whoever says, hey, why do we pay you 15 minutes admin time? We can look, oh, it's because you were overlapping with Billy and, in this case, a van driver. However, if you leave nothing in it, we don't know why we're paying you admin time, and that does raise some questions because, again, admin time is a staff code. It's not a PTO. It's not sick, personal, or vacation, and it's not a billable code like ResHab. So it's like we're paying you, but Ralph's not being reimbursed. So we got to figure out exactly what's going on. Again, 15 minutes here and there at the beginning and end of your shift is normal. Excuse me. Because one thing I always stress to new hires is pay yourself an extra 15 minutes and just go ahead and enter in your stuff at the end of your shift in Quantum. And really, that's saying a lot coming from someone that works in accounting. That we're almost begging you, hey, stay after your shift, pay yourself an extra 15 minutes just so your information that you're entering is taken care of, or enter it during your shift. And again, I think that's actually the next takeaway, if I'm not mistaken. But let's go to a little bit more of a probably a more likely scenario. And actually, not too long ago, I heard of this situation. So let's say my shift started at noon, excuse me. But for whatever reason, both the clients weren't there when I got there. I called around, and apparently they got out of their day program late, or they both had a doctor's appointments and they're running late or whatever. So I get to the house at 12, which again is my shift, but there's no one there. Well, really, you can do two things, but the more ideal thing to do is do admin time. And you can just say, waited on clients that arrived late from And honestly, that probably will happen. There probably may be times where you go to your shift and there are no clients there. If that's the case, you can't use ResHab because, again, I can't show ResHab down here if they're not technically in the house. Because, and honestly, that's lying. It's Medicaid fraud. If you say, hey, another and Sam were in the house from 12 to 12:30, but they really weren't, then we're falsifying a time card, and it's not a pretty scene. So that's obviously not right. But if I add it in and take it out, again, going back to a previous takeaway, this is not a staff code, so I have to see something underneath it. Well, I can't pay you 30 minutes for residential services in which no one received it, so that's wrong too. So in this case, admin's probably your best bet. And again, anytime you use admin codes, please use a note because that way we can track it. And again, you can just say something like arrived on time and clients were late. Obviously, the more detail, the better, but for purposes of this video, I'm going to keep it pretty short. There are times where your admin time may be substantially longer. We learned in, I think it was the second video, this idea of training versus shadowing. But let's say you weren't doing training or shadowing, but you had to come out to FNC or our main building off Park Place for, oh goodness, let's say a couple hours. So let's say from 1 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I'm going to left click, I'm going to drag that time. But I had to go out to, excuse me, Park Place for a 2-hour meeting. Well, if it's a meeting, it's not really training. I wasn't shadowing. I wasn't providing services, so I wasn't in the house. So admin time's really your best bet. And a way to think about it, admin can almost be kind of your go-to if there's nothing else there. Right now, there is a non-direct service time code. However, we are going to be getting rid of that because it's no longer needed. It's kind of pointless. So admin time is usually more important. However, this is a 2-hour block. This is from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. So a note is highly, if not required, because we want to know why we're paying 2 hours of time that wasn't a service to a client. So this is where you can say required meeting, and we'll pick on Betty. So Betty called us in for a meeting from 1 to 3. It was a required meeting. I couldn't get out of it. That way, if I'm ever called and said, hey, why are we paying you for 2 hours? I have a note that says, hey, it was a required meeting. That way we know. And the meetings could be, like a client's quarterly or annual that you may be called into. Again, if you're ever doing that, that's not technically residential services because you weren't in the house. So admin would probably be your best bet. But again, the whole purpose of this takeaway, or this commandment, is just making sure that your services that you're entering in this case ResHab, is not conflicting with other people's times. And again, the most simplest way of doing it is when you come into your shift, and again, let's say my shift, for this scenario, let's say my shift starts at 4. So I come into work at, let's say I walk in the door right at 4 p.m. I am punctual as I can be. So the staff that was there stayed until 4:30 for whatever reason. So let's say another person and same person was in the house from 4 onward. But remember, I just said I got there at 4 o'clock. The person I was relieving stayed until 4:30. Well, if I'm going to choose those clients from 4 o'clock on, the staff that I was relieving has to stop their ResHab at 4 o'clock. If they show they provide services to 4:30, we have a 30-minute overlap. Because not only am I saying, hey, I was providing services from 4 p.m. onward, the person that I relieved says, wait a minute, no, I was providing residential services until 4:30. So one of us is going to have to trim off the ResHab from our time. Either I have to take it off of mine, or they have to take it off of theirs. So in this case, let's say again, I did, oh, excuse me. Let's say the person I relieved who stayed until 4:30 is going to keep res hab. So I have to remove it from mine because, again, up until 4:30, someone else has already claimed these clients. So from 4:30 on, I'll claim them. But again, I can't have res hab up here with nothing down here. So I need to get rid of that. And I'll use admin time. And so I'll just make a short little note that says, hey, there was an overlap with the staff that I relieved. Whoever that was. We'll name him Jack. Jack stayed after and he wouldn't change his time. But I'm not going to get, I don't want to not get paid for Jack's staying over. I still show up at 4 o'clock. I want to be paid. So I will use admin time. So if this was printed off right just like this and came across my desk, this would look fine. Again, it's a staff code with nothing underneath. That's okay. And you're also being paid for residential services in which the clients were there. However, again, if you did show up at 4 o'clock, that's when your shift starts. But the staff that you're relieving stayed after. Again, make sure, hey, who's gonna keep the clients? Are you gonna show the res hab until when? I'll pick it up after that. But again, use the admin time to kind of float and balance who was actually there at what time. Because again, if both of you all, whoever you're relieving or who's relieving you, all use res hab, it's very unlikely that we'll never have an overlap because since we do everything in 15-minute increments, it's inevitable. So again, if you show up right at time or you come early or stay late, just make sure with the other staff who's using res hab until when, and just use admin to either float your time or their time to whenever you did truly leave or left or came in, excuse me. That way, not only are you being paid fairly, but we're able to bill without duplicate hours. Now, a question that I did get a few times, I'll kind of do this a very, what do you want to call it, unconventional example. So a really over-exaggerated overlap would be, let's say you and I worked in a house for 24 hours a day, and it's just one client. So if I chose res hab for that 24 hours, and you chose res hab for that 24 hours for that same client, 3 things are going to happen. I'm going to be paid for 24 hours, which is correct. You're going to be paid for 24 hours, which is correct. But the client is going to be billed for 48 hours. That's impossible. We can't bill for 48 hours of service in a 24-hour window. And again, that's an extreme overlap, but that's what an overlap is. And again, the vast majority of them are 15 minutes, but again, they add up, and it's a very ugly thing to be looking at. So again, the whole concept of commandment number 4 just basically says, hey, check with the client or check with the staff that's relieving you and you're relieving, and just work out a plan to say, okay, if you're going to stay after, I'll use admin time at the beginning of my shift, and I'll pick up res hab as soon as you leave. That way there are no overlaps, and that'll just make payroll and billing processes that much easy. But again, the whole situation with admin time, again, it's the only staff code that really doesn't fit anywhere. But again, the major thing is anytime you use admin time, please write down a note, because let's say, again, this situation here from 1 to 3 o'clock, if there was no note, which this doesn't have, that's not good. We're going to have to question it, and we'll probably give you a call and say, hey, from 1 to 3, you're showing res hab, or I'm sorry, you're showing admin time, there's no note. What was it for? Because again, that adds up, and we'd like to know, what's going on. If we're paying for time, that's not with a client. And again, that just having a simple note just helps us out extremely. So that's commandment number 4, and I will meet you around for commandment number 5. Thank you.